Do you know how he gives a little teaser there that like flashes us up on the screen for like a split second just to catch us off guard?
Yeah.
Hello, everybody. I'm Venus then.
There you go. We were there for a whisper, and now we're back again, large and in charge. So there we are. And Philippa is leading us down a jolly merry path today, because your topic, we are still doing our history myths series, and Philippa is going to be confronting, exploring, confounding the myth, or the belief that Thomas Boleyn was effectively the pimp master general for his own family. So I'm looking forward to exploring that myth and possibly seeing it refuted. We shall find out. But as we are going to be talking about big pimping, I think perhaps before we get any further into that, I should do the necessary, because it's disclaimer time, friends. Welcome to History After Dark. We called it that for a variety of reasons. Chief amongst them is this is a place where we can let our freak flags fly, where we can indulge in our love of four-letter expletives, innuendo, general filth, mayhem, and essentially the decay of modern manners and society. That's what we're here for. So with that in mind, if you are in a location with a judgmental boss, put a headphone in. If you happen to be around a small child, this small child is a problem. We call this child Timmy for our own purposes. Where's your mug? Let me see it. Timmy's a problem. Timmy's a massive problem. Timmy's a sort of child that hears one depraved thing one time, just the once, locks it away in his mind palace, takes it to school with him, and then repeats it in front of his teacher, who in my mind is Miss Honey from Matilda. Now, Miss Honey from Matilda is as pure as the driven. So she does not watch this filth. She's not like you horrible lot. And so she doesn't know the first cardinal rule of History After Dark, which is if you don't know what something means, it's not for you. Don't Google it. That's fine. Not everything is for everyone. So Miss Honey Googles it, and now she is in the fetal position, rocking back and forth, weeping, non-verbal in the corner. Not ideal for a primary school teacher. You've been called at the school. Why does Timmy know this unspeakably depraved thing? And also, you're now on the hook for however many weeks of therapy it takes to get that woman upright and verbal again. No one needs that. Put a headphone in. I think it's abundantly clear how today's going to go. So at no point should anybody be coming into these comment section, nor nary any of our other comment sections and saying anything along the lines of, "Oh, I very much enjoy History After Dark. I like the history, but must you swear it's very unladylike." Look, we do what we want because we're grown women. So fuck off. Second, what we're not going to do is pin that comment, because we know that what you want is for everyone to see it and then come in and shame you ritualistically in the comments. We aren't doing that because that's your kink. And look, I'm not going to kink shame you. They might. But what I am going to shame is kink without consent. Look, if you want to have unspeakable things done to you in a Brighton basement, then you can go and see my lovely friend Tallulah Fanula. She is aggressive. Okay? She is the things that woman has done with a karcher.
What?
Will put hairs on your chest and life in your years. So with her, though, you have to pay your money for that, because you've got those karchers, they aren't cheap. We've seen them about 400 quid. So if you want that done to your ball sack, crack on, love. But you pay your money and you take your choice. That is kink with consent. At no point is this a drinking game. My God, I hope you're all adults, because I've just talked about karchering your balls. It's never be a drinking game, but you can do what you want. You're grown-ups. This is not going to be medical nor legal advice. This is History After Dark. Let's talk about the pimp daddy himself. Or is he?
I'm so sorry. I'm letting the side down now. I don't know what a karcher is.
A pressure washer.
Oh, okay. I was thinking.
Other tools are
completely different in my head.
Oh yeah. I just said a karcher. There are other brands of pressure washer, but if you allow a pressure washer at full force to go across your naked bollocks, you will be a fucking eunuch.
Yeah, you won't be bollocks.
You will be a eunuch. You can borrow the top cap of Alice, babe.
I didn't realise that was a pressure washer or a brand name pressure washer. I was thinking it was something like
depraved, more depraved than it actually was.
Which in the circumstances, I think isn't an unreasonable assumption to make. And then my head
I was saying it.
I wonder if it's that.
Yeah.
I was starting to think it's one of those little cages you put around your bit. Anyway.
What? Do you mean a chastity belt?
Yeah, for men. It's like a little thing, isn't it?
Is it
time? Is it time to talk about Thomas Boleyn? I think it might be.
Off you pop, Philippa.
Every time all of you now go to pressure wash your driveway, you will think about male chastity belts. It's a great start.
Wow, what a segue into.
I think I just fell off my segue and smashed my face and anyway.
So
but I would still want to fared better than Thomas Boleyn's daughters.
Well, indeed. Well, so Thomas Boleyn. We're looking at, is he ambitious father? Is he maligned in history? So anyway, so I wanted to look at the historical reputation of Thomas Boleyn, of course, father of Anne Boleyn, and address this. I'm going to say it's a myth that he pushed his daughters toward Henry VIII. So we'll look at we'll go through what's been the narrative around his story, how he's been represented in popular culture, and we'll have a look at what the actual facts say. And it'd be quite interesting, girls, for you to jump in and see what your thoughts are as well. So I suppose the first thing to say is Thomas Boleyn's story is always told in the shadows of the much more dramatic story, the lives of his daughter Anne Boleyn and her husband Henry VIII. That's how Thomas Boleyn's story comes to us always, and as an appendage to the Anne Boleyn story, which is actually true of many of the figures that we've talked about in the Tudor court. But depending on who you ask, most people, I suppose, see him as one of sort of the Tudor court's most cunning social and political climbers. And then starting to get a bit of a movement now, people like Laura Mackay, who are putting forward a different perspective. Actually, he's a devoted courtier, very talented, very educated, and he's caught in the crossfire of what happens in 1536 with his daughter and Henry VIII. So I thought we'd have a look. Is he this ambitious father that pushes his daughters towards the king because he sees personal gain in it for him, or has he been maligned? Is his story misunderstood? Is he unfairly judged? And actually, has he just been lied about? So let's do it. So he was the Earl of Wiltshire. Obviously, we've mentioned Anne Boleyn, but of course, her brother George Boleyn was also judicially
murdered.
Yes, in 1536. And so that's two of his surviving children, and Mary Boleyn was his other daughter, who was long been believed to be a mistress of Henry VIII. He's portrayed often as cold, calculating, this relentless pursuit of wealth, power, proximity to the throne. And then when it all went wrong, he just stood by and let his children sort of take the consequences, and they're destroyed. And he just sort of stands back and decides, well, better not get involved because that would be bad for my position. And this is the kind of impression we're given of him. And that the motivation for me to cover him today came from a post I put on Instagram not too long ago about I just posted about his tomb, which is at St. Peter's Church, Hever, like a stone's throw. It's right next to Hever Castle. And he's buried there. And under the post, I was getting comments like, he doesn't deserve any accolades. He was a dog. I hope he's in hell. Like really strong feelings and obviously very negative. So his legacy, I suppose, is the way we understand him, of course, has been really heavily shaped by fictional dramatizations. So in books like The Other Boleyn Girl, in TV dramatizations like The Tudors, which was brilliant, but you know, it was a story a lot of the time. But even serious historians in the past have labelled him ruthless and unfeeling, and we'll get into why I think that was. So, and I must say, I don't blame fictional telling of history at all. I think it's a fantastic, you know, dramatisation. We've talked about this before. It's a fantastic way of people getting into history. It's not very pleasant when people regurgitate it and quote it back as if it's like, you know, it is a story and it's a dramatisation, and you've got to think which bits of a story have been emphasized, subdued, you know, because they are, you know, the stories have a beginning, a middle and an end. And if it's being created to entertain, which of course is the point of fiction generally, then it has to keep above a certain level of granularity to prevent it either being too complex or, dare I say it, boring for a wider audience. So I'd argue that Thomas's story and his personality have probably fallen foul of the reality, if you like, of fiction. So, you know, so and bearing in mind that his story is always told in relation, like I said, to Anne's and Henry VIII's story. And the other way it's often been framed is that, and this is the same of Anne as well, that their downfall was inevitable because, you know, they were upstarts who climbed way too high, way too fast, and this is kind of what happens if you do that, which is an interesting take. It comes around a lot in the Victorian period as well. You know your place, know your station. I feel like it comes from. But obviously the truth is always more nuanced, always more complex. So let me tell you a little bit about him. He was born in around 1477, because believe it or not, we don't know the birth dates of many people, male or female, regardless. Gets my go. That's one of my like rants. Yeah, we don't know when she was born because she was a woman. No, we don't know when she was born because nobody fucking knew when anyone was born. Anyway. He was the son of a wealthy, this is what we're told very often, but relatively minor Norfolk family. His father, was a man called Sir William, but then his mother was a woman called Margaret Butler, and I'll come back to her in a moment because this is another related but very important myth around Thomas. This idea that they socially climb, the Boleyns become, you know, beyond their station, as it were. Doesn't ring true if your mother was from one of the most disgustingly wealthiest families around. So the focus has always been in Anne's and therefore Thomas's story that they were from this minor Norfolk merchant family. Completely ignores the astronomical wealth of the Butler family, whose falcon crest, by the way, is the one that Anne adopts later as queen. That comes from the Butlers. Now, how do I know this? Well, because I'm very lucky, and Gareth Russell talks about this in detail on the Anne Boleyn tour every year. So I've and actually, and if anyone wants to see that, that's on my Patreon in full. You can watch that. And the more I listen to Gareth talk about the Butler family, the more I'm frankly finding it inexplicable as to why that lineage is not talked about more now. I can see why it was hidden in the past, but because of course it doesn't fit with this narrative. And so anyway, so there's that. So they're not coming from a minor gentry family. They are on one side, the other side astronomically wealthy. which is why he marries a Howard, by the way. This is how he can marry a Howard. So he's a very accomplished courtier and diplomat. He serves under Henry VII and obviously then subsequently Henry VIII. He was brilliant at languages, fluent in multiple languages, highly educated, politically astute. He served in embassies in the Netherlands, France, Holy Roman Empire. And obviously, if you're ambassador, you are literally the country's representative. So you're very trustworthy. You're able to work with some sort of autonomy on behalf of the country and the king. So it's not like you could get those kind of roles, without a degree of ability, quite high ability. So then where do we get this legend from that he's the man who threw his daughters at the king? So first of all, we need to look at Anne's sister Mary Boleyn. It's just accepted that that Mary had was Henry VIII's mistress. There's actually some people put a question mark over her affair with the king because we actually have no details about it. We don't really know when it happened. We don't know any details about like where they might have met, how it was conducted. I know it's an affair, so it's not like it's going to be like I went and saw Mary. But its existence also is based on two pieces of evidence. So when Henry applied for a dispensation to the Pope in 1527 to marry Anne Boleyn, obviously he didn't need it in the end anyway, and there was other details, but that dispensation listed an impediment of affinity arising from illicit intercourse in whatever degree, even the first. So Mary's not named, and some people argue, well, that could be a dispensation to cover Henry VIII sleeping with Anne's mother, Elizabeth Boleyn, née Howard, and that comes from, in turn, Sir George Throckmorton apparently saying to the king, I told your grace, I feared if ye did marry Queen Anne, your conscience would be more troubled at length, for it is thought ye have meddled with both the mother and the sister, to which Henry replies, never the mother. And there's your evidence. That's your evidence for the affair with Mary. It's actually very sketchy. But assuming there is an affair, did Thomas benefit? And again, this is something that because I can't take credit for these initial ideas because they do come from Gareth, but he's like, do we know of any situation where a man is keen to make much of the fact that he's sleeping with another man's daughter? It's like it's generally an awkward thing. It's not like, oh, I fucked your daughter. Have a title. Let's think about it in reality. And Henry occurs to me as someone he doesn't really like awkwardness. He doesn't really, yeah.
And he's also a bit of a prude as well.
He is a bit of a prude.
Randomly, yeah.
More than, yeah.
I mean, the 6 wives, that's another myth. The 6 wives, I think, lead us astray. And also we have so many kingly shaggers. Henry VIII is not Charles II. Charles II is like, I'm going to build a palace and I'm going to have loads of bedrooms for all my mistresses and I'm going to parade them and I'm going to enjoy every second of everyone knowing that I've got 16 girls on the go. Yeah. That is not that Henry thinks of himself as Sir Loyal Heart. He thinks of himself as a character out of an Arthurian legend because the greatest lies are the ones we tell ourselves.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
Everyone but yourself.
So there's a big question mark over it anyway. But okay, so does Thomas make any advancement then during this time? No. Actually, there's no sort of windfall of titles or land during the time that Mary and Henry are thought to be together. So if Thomas barely benefits from, and it could be that the relationship didn't happen, could be a reason why he didn't benefit from it, but say he did, he doesn't benefit from it in that time. he's already on an upward trajectory. He's, you know, long before his daughters are even, you know, in the picture. And all of those diplomatic postings and his appointments seem to have come purely through his own efforts. So then comes Anne. And we have this common narrative that, you know, that Anne, well, okay, well, there's lots of myths around Anne. Obviously, the biggest one is that it is all to do with the charges in 1536, which I don't think anyone who looks at it for more than 5 minutes now can ever give any credence. You know, that Anne and George are executed on false charges, basically. But the other myth that closely follows behind that is, of course, that she got there to that position, that Henry was able to do that to her because she was playing a game of ambition herself, that she was after the top spot of queen, and she had this master plan. So it might be helpful just to have a little look at the timeline. So 1521, Anne is summoned back to England from the continent. She's been at the French court. And the reason she's summoned back is because of a situation that's arisen on the Butler side of the family. There's a feud between the Butlers and the Boleyn branches of the family over who should inherit the Earl of Ormond's title and everything that goes with it. And Wolsey, Henry VIII's right-hand man at this time, decides the best way to settle this, basically to get it off his to-do list, I suppose, is to marry the two sides of the family. So Anne is brought back to marry her cousin, 3 times removed cousin, but Seamus Butler. But initially it was going to be Mary who was married off to Seamus. And Gareth's theory is that Anne is potentially Mary Boleyn's quick marriage to William Carey was nothing to do with the supposed affair with Henry VIII and him trying to have to get rid of her quickly, you know, but that actually it was the Boleyns trying to get Mary off the market so that she couldn't be made to marry Seamus, because there was no actual, you know, Wolsey might have thought this was a good solution, but it wasn't a solution for the Boleyns. They didn't get anything. You know, if the title was going to go back to sort of their line at all, it would be the next generation if Mary managed to have a son. You know, it's like there's no actual benefit to them. So then, but then Anne is brought back. Mary's been married off. She can't marry Seamus. Anne falls in love with, or starts a courtship with, Henry Percy. So it doesn't appear, well, obviously neither sister are going to, they don't want, so Thomas doesn't want, or the family don't want the girls to be marrying into the Butlers anyway. And Anne is courting Henry Percy. But then, of course, as we know, at some point, she catches the eye of Henry VIII. We know she was in a court masque at York Place in March 1522, where Henry was also performing. I don't know if we know, you know, we can't be sure that that's when he noticed her, but certainly by 1525, things are more serious, things are more public, and this, of course, is when we start getting the story that Anne famously refuses to become his mistress, only his wife, and she retreats to Hever. We've got the love letters that Henry sends her there. And depending on how you read them, some people read them as a love story, some people read them as a controlling, manipulative, obsessive
love bombing,
boyfriend.
It's love bombing.
Yeah.
It's sexual harassment by your boss. She works at court. He's the manager, and he's sexually harassing her to the point that she left where her job was.
She left. And one of the points we make when we're on the Anne Boleyn tour is, you know, we come from London and go back to Hever. So we pick up in London, we go to Hever, and we go back to the Tower of London one of the days and go back to Hever. And one of the points we make is, look how long that just took us in a coach on well-made roads most of the time. You know, Hever Castle is not, it looks like it as the crow flies, it's not within easy reach of London. When she retreats to Hever, she is trying to get away. That's my belief. I think she was absolutely trying to get away from him. I think when she says no, she meant no. I don't think she was playing a game. We'll get into that in a bit more. So if Thomas Boleyn, Thomas, had been scheming for influence and believed that even despite his older daughter already being a mistress and it becoming to nothing, he's going to encourage his second daughter to become a mistress, I don't know under what circumstances he would, or what evidence he would have thought that this would have
panned out,
had any benefit. But surely he would have encouraged Anne, sent her back.
Yeah,
sent her back to the king. Be the king's mistress. You have to. He doesn't do that. So there's that. The other point to make here is it is never desirable for a noble family to have their daughters despoiled. So that they're undesirable or worth less in the marriage market as a marriage alliance. So the advancement from the king, any benefit from being a mistress or for the whole family. So she's the mistress. The whole family would have to benefit in such a significant and permanent way in order to outweigh the issues then that they would have in that girl being able to marry, or what kind of alliance they can make. This idea that everyone's trying to get to king and queen, they're fairly high up already. If they can make an alliance with another powerful family, that's what you're wanting to do. And it doesn't matter that they were the mistress of the king, they're still despoiled. So basically, that's not something that noble families are encouraging. And I think it probably I don't know, but I imagine it would have a knock-on effect as well. So it wouldn't just be the girl who's the mistress. It would equally, then it would just devalue the whole family. So any brothers or sisters and what marriage alliances they could make. So, so there's that. And then if Thomas is seen as pushing his daughter into the arms of the king for his own personal benefit, he can easily obviously be cast as the villain. And what does that mean? It means Anne can be seen purely as a victim, purely as a pawn in the lives of the men around her. And that takes Anne's agency away. I think she demonstrates agency. I don't think she was a woman with no agency. And we don't have evidence that her father's encouraging her. We actually, if anything, probably have more evidence that her father's supporting her decision. Because I think that is a reflection of something darker, this fact that Anne isn't allowed agency in her own story. That we have to believe that she just sort of is pushed from pillar to post, and that she didn't see. I mean, like, why would she not say no? We can see it from 500 years that this man is tyrannical and evil, and he casts aside the ones he's loved. He's very cold to them. Maybe she saw that. Also, she's already fond of Henry Percy. So, but I think this is where the sort of Victorian historians maybe sought to frame Anne's rise as like morally corrupt, politically engineered, because that takes away her agency, makes her seem conniving. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to just, maybe it's just a couple of writers, but it makes her seem conniving, it makes her seem manipulative. So where she has got agency, it's all for evil. She's the author of this elaborate plan, and kind of then the downfall is either inevitable or deserved, or both. which we need to always remember with Anne's story, what happened was totally and utterly unprecedented. Every part of it. The idea that either Anne or Thomas knew that if they just did this, and this, Anne would end up queen is a huge case of writing history backwards. You know, seeing the end point, seeing every step that happened before it, and then saying, oh, so every step led to it. If you see what I mean, that's writing it the wrong way round. You know, it wasn't an inevitable outcome. You know, him getting rid of every part of it. You know, Henry getting rid of Catherine, of breaking with Rome, having Anne as his sort of wife in waiting. You know, the whole lot. I know there was, you know,
ennobling her, making her the Marquis of Pembroke in her own right.
In her own right.
It's the fact the annulment takes the better part of a decade
is crazy.
The fact that Anne is swiftly burning down the candle of her fertile years, and you can see her growing panic. You're completely right. None of this is a master plan, because if it was a master plan, it would be over. She'd be married in 18 months, bagging out babies.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And of course, the annulment doesn't actually come from the Pope anyway. Yeah. It comes from Henry's Henry's appointed Archbishop of Canterbury. So, which obviously causes major problems for Elizabeth in the future. So their daughter, obviously everyone knows that. Sorry. Okay. So I think the idea that there was a master plan is flawed. I think the idea that Thomas is pushing his daughters into the king's arms when he never benefits from it is just very odd. The fact he lets her stay at Hever when she's trying to get away from the king, I think it points in the opposite direction to how he's being framed. So then we get to 1536, and Anne and George. So he's got 3 surviving children. So Mary, Anne, and George. Anne and George are arrested, tried, and executed on these fabricated charges of adultery in Anne's case, and I suppose they're both adultery, but incest and treason. And at this point, then, many accuse Thomas of abandoning his children, saying nothing, doing nothing. And I would like to say, realistically, what could he have done? Protest, resign, appeal to Henry? So because he does nothing, quote unquote, nothing, then the discussion turns to, why does he stay quiet? Is it survival? Is it cowardice? I would say, this is just a situation none of us could contemplate. The idea that he's calculating any response is, I think, to say, well done you for never having, or good, thank goodness you've never had anything like this trauma in your life. If you think what's happening here when he's looking at both his children being executed, two of his 3 surviving children being executed, that he's somehow thinking logically through anything. If he's thinking logically through any of it, I would suggest it's similar to what Anne and George were thinking through, which is, who's remaining after we can't get out of this? Who's remaining after we go? The toddler Elizabeth, who's between 2 and 3 at this time, just over 2, 2.5. Is she 2.5? She's 2.5, I think. There was nothing to say that she couldn't be cast aside and never be seen again. Sent off to a nunnery, Henry doesn't treat his children like that, which is odd, actually, for someone like him. But, anyway, so if he was thinking anything, I would suggest he's thinking along those lines. And of course, after this all happens and they're executed, he withdraws from court life. He goes back to Hever, rarely appears again. A totally broken man. you know, he's got no career left. He's stripped of his offices. He has no influence. The idea that if he just stayed quiet, that he could continue somehow. I mean, if Henry feels awkward about being around the men whose daughters he's sleeping with, it's probably quite awkward if you've also killed them.
Yeah.
So, and there's no contemporary sources, apparently. I'm going to be doing an interview with Laura McKay soon, where I'm going to really dig into this with her, because I'm fascinated now that I've looked at it for this. But there doesn't appear to be any contemporary sources which accuse Thomas Boleyn of ever pushing his daughters into Henry's bed. And also, if you think about it, Henry accuses Anne of sorcery and witchcraft at some point, doesn't he? He sort of says, "Oh, she beguiled me." He doesn't ever say. He doesn't ever seem to accuse Thomas Boleyn of pushing on him someone he didn't want. That doesn't come up. That's an idea. So all these this idea of him pimping out his daughters, as we've put it today, is something which seems to emerge much later. It makes, so probably in the Victorian, well, so I think it's around the Victorian time, and then makes its way into fiction, which of course means it's been told and retold, and truth seems to appear to come from the number of times something is repeated, not examined, and so we get this story about him. And it's convenient. It's a convenient stereotype, you know, an ambitious courtier, puppet master. So you can ignore the actual man, the skilled diplomat, the loyal servant, the broken-hearted father. You know, when he dies in 1539, his world is shattered. It's shattered. And also, let me just say, what's supposed to be wrong with ambition? This feeds into this. Now, we're British and we have this tall poppy syndrome, unfortunately, in our culture. We do like to cut down anyone who we feel is getting a bit above their station. And that's I don't know where that comes from, but it's clearly been in place for quite a long time. But this idea that ambition is bad, you know, if he's ambitious, well, who out of the male courtiers, and probably even female, are not ambitious at the Tudor court? Who is not trying to make political alliances and climb up the ranks? Who's not trying to make an advantageous marriage? You know, there's no context around there if you're just saying he's ambitious. Well, yeah, him and absolutely everybody else. Like, it would have been odd if he wasn't.
That's the court.
It's the court. It's the court. And actually, it's society as well. We've got the merchant classes emerging. You know, we've got people trying to make their lives better. So yeah, and you know, compared to figures like Thomas Cromwell or, you know, the Duke of Norfolk, he's probably a bit more cautious than they were. So yeah,
they were exceptionally arrogant, weren't they?
Yeah, they were gung ho in some way, I suppose. But yeah, so I would like to argue actually that I don't think Thomas Boleyn has had a fair go. I think he had, if you think about his life up till then, he's married a lovely lady that he seems to be in love with. They have children, they have a lovely home. He's enjoyed his education, he's made good positions, he's had responsibility, he's got these lovely children. And then his children are rising up alongside him, and then they go past him, and then it is shattered. Everything is shattered in the most horrific way. And yeah, and then I think, and then so actually, I think there needs to be a redress, because he was a victim of circumstance, and yet, to add insult to injury, his name has become synonymous with opportunism and becoming too big for your boots, and almost deserving what happened. So
maybe with what you just said about, you know, he was like labelled as ambitious and an upstart, and you know that's been done in a negative way, where, as you both pointed out, yes, Dad was court, Dad was everyone. So that makes me think that's why the butler influence gets, or the Ormond influence gets played down, because they were upstarts and they didn't come from this big fancy family, because that all feeds into the same narrative. So it's easy to play that down. And the other thing is I really wish we knew more about Elizabeth Boleyn Howard and her thoughts and feelings and on this topic, because they must have had hundreds of conversations on this between husband and wife and as a family. But she's very silent in our history, really, isn't she? So, and they found her buried in a coffee shop or something random, didn't they?
It was a church originally.
Yeah, and now it's part of the coffee shop.
It's part of
it was even hard to find where this poor woman was buried, if you think the significance of her birth family and then the family she married into. And I can't remember how long she survived her husband, but I think it was a good few years, wasn't it? And it was almost like she was just,
She don't know. I mean, bearing in mind she's lost at least 2 babies who were old enough to, have a full church burial. In childhood, in infancy. So, she's already gone through a lot, and I don't know how that would be recorded. If I'm honest, I don't know how would we record someone's horrendous grief nowadays for the future. Do you know what I mean? I don't know how that would come up.
No.
But yeah, I mean, it's just so no. I think he deserves a re-examination, and maybe
I think also on the kind of the he does nothing while he's waiting for his children to be executed. I do just want to flag that with the men accused, there was lots of talk about who was going to get pardons. There were expectations of pardons. And let's not forget, Thomas Wyatt finagles his way out. And of all of them, there's perhaps the most evidence that he had a relationship with Anne Boleyn that predates the marriage. So there was every reason to believe that maybe his son might be one of the lucky ones and get a pardon.
So keep quiet, and then you're not jeopardizing potential pardon.
And he may have been working through the back channels, because whatever's happening with Wyatt, someone's making a deal with Cromwell about that.
We don't know.
I believe it's entirely possible that Boleyn is trying to do the exact same thing, or with some other factor or agent. Perhaps he has a poor relationship with Cromwell, and so it makes it more difficult. You're not going to approach the king about this. No. He's got to find the back channel. And when it comes to Anne, I don't believe that anybody thought that she was going to be executed apart from the king and maybe the swordsman. I don't think she believed it. I don't think the people in charge of the tower believed it. Hence why the show of the execution is all built. The scaffold's there, but there's no coffin.
No plan to actually bury her.
No plan. It's all that is hurried, because this is an anointed queen. It is, of all of the outrageous things that happen in Anne's life, her execution is perhaps the most outrageous of all of them. In every single you don't execute queens, anointed queens, and arguably that crossed the Rubicon, because it shows people that having had that divine anointing, you are still permeable. You aren't actually divine. Killing Anne, I think, puts the future of the monarchy in danger. Arguably, it's how we get to the execution of Mary Queen of Scots, and then those two together, the execution of Charles I. I think you need those two things before.
It breaks that
the spell, the magic.
But it breaks the spell. Yeah. I wonder as well that people, obviously we know that he was already going on with Jane Seymour, promising her that he'd send word when she's convicted, he'll send word when she's executed, and it's all very much it's happening. I'll just let you know when it's happened. Obviously we know that they wouldn't have known that at the time, But yeah, I think it's very interesting. Sorry, when I said we don't know, I meant as in like there's nothing written down about who's dealing on Wyatt's behalf. We don't know the detail of that. We can surmise that something's clearly happening, and therefore, yeah, like you say, it could have been the idea that he just remained quiet. You know, we always say the absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. We don't know that he was not doing anything.
And let's remember that in 1536 there were still convents.
Yes, yes.
They thought, I think everybody, probably including Jane Seymour, thought that Anne was going to a convent. I think I don't know when Anne realised that she wasn't going to a convent. Possibly when she knelt down. That's when she realised.
I'm kind of hoping she never did. I'm kind of hoping it was so quick that she just
and in that maybe she was lying to herself, that she thought if I just say the right words, maybe he's listening, maybe he's got the approval, and I think that in that regard as well, because obviously Uncle Howard gets a bad rap, and he should for many reasons, but he gets a bad rap for passing sentence to be burned or beheaded at the king's pleasure. I don't think he believed it would actually happen, but you have to pass the sentence. You have to name her a traitor, because you have to take all of the stuff. You know, it's a land and cash grab. It's a power grab. Attainting people is a power grab. And there were people attainted for treason who spent years in the Tower with nothing happening. The fact that this speedy execution happened, all of it's wild. The whole thing, the timeline is all wild. And I think no one but Henry knew it was going to happen that way, those last days.
Yeah. So have I changed your mind about Thomas then?
Yeah.
I think we both kind of had that line of thought a little bit anyway, but some of the points you've raised, like breaking it down even more, from the discussions that you and Gareth have had, are really, really interesting. And it's so easy to. So I think Kat, sorry if I'm speaking for you, but we both kind of thought, Thomas Boleyn has been placed in this role and it's not fair and it's not correct. But then you've managed to break that down even more. So it's not just a kind of surface where people say to us, well, Thomas Boleyn did this. We can go, well, actually, that's not true. And I could have given, sorry, Kat, I'm speaking for you. I'm so sorry. But I could have given an overview of that. But now there's extra layers to add into that as well. So, and it just goes to show again and again and again and again, there's so much still. There's so many nuances. There's so many things that are covered and uncovered that it never stops. But I think the Tudors, probably because they're so well covered and they're the big thing, aren't they? Compared to most other periods in history, it's so easy to perpetuate a myth. And because they're written about, there's more screenplays, there's more this, that, and all the rest of it, you can perpetuate those myths again and again and again and again. And people, there are more people absorbing that. It's what I call the White Queen effect. And yeah, as you say, the Tudors was great, but I mean, Henry only had one sister. Her name was Margaret, and she did all the things Mary did. I don't understand.
Yeah,
I don't actually understand how anyone thought that was a reasonable. I can understand some changes of storyline, but that was like, that had knock-on effects. Like,
it was bizarre, wasn't it?
You really, can't have one of them have. There's two lines of like royal blood that contends the throne at future. So,
what I will say is, when we meet Henry VIII in the Tudors, the actual Margaret in that timeline was already in Scotland, so she wasn't at court. So borrowing her name, because of course Catherine's daughter Mary already exists, so there's already a Mary Tudor.
I remember about Mary.
Very confusing. They changed it because there's too many Marys.
Yeah,
I know.
And then you've got Mary Boleyn.
Yeah, I just remember Mary. So Catherine Aragon's daughter, Mary, whoever the actress was, clearly working out how to heave her bosom in the corset. I've never seen anyone breathe so heavily in a corset. She was like inflating, deflating, inflating, deflating. It was like So,
well, I mean, they tight laced all of them.
Yes.
So
Well, yes, I
absolutely.
know. But it was like
they
she
do.
clearly because she got angry a lot.
Yes, very
It's
indignant.
hilarious.
Lots of indignant heaving.
breast heaving. Yeah. So there you go.
I mean, to be fair,
dear.
as you would if you were in her position.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that was bullshit.
Totally.
Yeah, she had a really. Henry just left a trail of destruction behind him with virtually every person he ever met, ever.
He was a
Yeah.
horrible
Shit.
abuser.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Just, like,
Who literally achieved
destruction. He
so
just
little.
destroyed shit.
Yeah. And the thing is, if he'd had a son that lived with Catherine of Aragon, we would not remember him.
No, we
would not remember him.
No,
because he wouldn't have dissolved the monasteries, he wouldn't have done Reformation, and he wouldn't have had 6 wives. This is a man who is famous for the women.
Oh yeah, definitely. The 6 wives is the hook, and that is because that can be the sum total of what people know about him. Because then from that you hear people say he went from one wife to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next, which isn't how it happened at all.
No,
and then they're really surprised that he was married to Catherine of Aragon for 20 years before, 24 in total, but around 20 years when he starts to try and divorce her. Like, oh, that's different. Yeah, because there's But no, I agree. I don't think we'd talk about him at all if it wasn't for the 6 wives part.
Utterly forgettable.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wouldn't you love to be able to just tell him all this stuff now?
Oh, God, yeah.
Everyone hates you. You determined
no
babies, and actually your tadpoles might have been a bit dodgy. Everyone thought you were a minger, just like
some of the portraits that like now sort of the lesser well-known portraits where he seems really piggy-eyed and like he's not at all attractive.
Well, they say though that I believe that kind of appearance, from like people who attempt to do posthumous diagnosis, that really sort of jowly but small-eyed thing, they say that could be a sign of Cushing's.
What's Cushing's?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a genetic component, but it's I want to say metabolic.
Shall I Google it? It's
I'm searching.
Isn't it? But yeah, it certainly seems. Oh God, I think ages ago I talked about. I think it was some of Kyra Kramer's stuff about sort of the genetic thing that was obvious. I say obviously, if you possibly had to put your money one way or the other after reading her evidence, it would probably say that there was some genetic stuff going on, and that's why they didn't live very long, or which I know wasn't uncommon in those days, or if you look at reproduction and stuff like that, it was just an epic fail.
I think Leslie talks about I'm sure Leslie Smith has talked about this, and it's right, so don't quote me, but it was something like, yes, all of what happened, it was not unique. However, the rate at which it happened between Henry and his wives was a lot more frequent than it was in the general population.
According to NHS Direct, Cushing's, the most common cause of Cushing's today is taking steroid medication. So Cushing's is caused by having too much cortisol in your body. It can also be caused by a non-cancerous growth near the pituitary gland or the adrenal glands. That's why I think I call it a metabolic illness.
Right. So not genetic.
Is that why sometimes cortisol is put on weight because there's so much cortisol?
Yeah, because so Cushing's is a metabolic illness, which presumably has a genetic component. If it is in the olden days, it's caused potentially by cancers. There's probably a genetic component, but the symptoms are more body fat on your neck, upper back, chest, and tummy, a red round face, skin that bruises easily, muscle weakness, loss of libido, changes in mood, so you can feel irritable, anxious, and depressed. If you're a female, you get irregular periods. That probably didn't affect Henry. But you also get excessive hair growth as well. So some of those symptoms do sound like Henry in his later years.
They do, but he was also
those
in
people's
constant
sons
pain.
never made it that far, did they, for us to then assess?
Yeah, I'm still of the sort of my start point is always to look for the more obvious. Like, he did such awful things that we want a big answer for why, but the fact that he's got this ulcerated leg and like he was in massive amounts of pain, like it could just be that as well.
Yeah,
I don't know, but
I mean, the
there's
leg
always
thing,
Some people are just gits or psychopaths.
And
look, the
he
leg
was
thing must have been agony. The leg thing must have been agony, and
Yes,
it's caused
sure.
by a combination or one of two things: his garters and or type 2 diabetes.
Mhm.
the fact that it doesn't heal, because it was a jousting accident injury, wasn't it? Yeah,
but it
It
seems
never
to hit
heals.
both.
Yeah.
So when he starts
Mind you-
going black in the face, that's osteomyelitis. That's blood poisoning.
The if you've got a big injury, like on a leg especially, where there's not that much flesh on the front of a leg, then it takes forever to like nowadays they have this special mesh, and they kind of close the wound up slow, and it's a really slow process to get it to do it properly. Of course, he wouldn't have had any of that.
In some ways, there could be a whole what if-dery thing if in, April 1536, they had just made the call to amputate the leg and he'd survived it.
Yeah, would he have
been less of a shit?
He'd have been really
With
good
his
at
little
hopping.
peg leg.
Yeah.
good at hopping?
The problem with that, though, is that nobody could have suggested it, because they would have had to, there'd have been an implication there that he might not make it, and then that's treasonous.
Yeah. No,
I mean, I think it must
No
have
one
been
could have suggested it, just in case. And would
It
you want
must
to be
have
that
been
surgeon? No.
They must have suggested it. Seeing the injury, they must have gone the best case. There must have been at least one physician that went, we could just take the leg.
Yeah.
But you can't encourage the king to do that if he's like, never mention that again.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Wow. There's a massive ass hat. So there we go.
Yeah.
He was.
There we are.
He was. And I think it's a shame that if Thomas, I'm erring that Thomas really wasn't how he's been framed, and therefore that is just so awful that that's how he's been remembered, when his children were taken off him in the most
barbaric way.
Barbaric.
If you look at the Six Wives narrative up until the last, I'm going to say 15 years or whatever, when people have started examining them more closely, Henry was almost perceived as a victim, wasn't he? All these terrible women. So therefore, everybody who was associated with them must have been a terrible person as well. So
I think he was more glorified for, I'm not sure what reason, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I'm going to say that
everything happened around him.
I do still hear in a fairly frequent and quite disturbing amount of cases that Catherine Howard was guilty and thus deserved her punishment.
I know.
I don't care if she fucked her way from Kent to Donegal. I don't give a fuck. She doesn't deserve to be beheaded for it. Are you on meth? What are you talking about?
That's when you hope people are on meth, because at least it would explain their ridiculous train of thought.
It's like pseudo.
No, she fucking didn't. No, she didn't.
It feels like pseudo intellectualism to me. It's like, just get out of here with your opinion, because it's just, please go away and actually think about what you're saying.
Like, turn on your empathy.
Think about it.
Because you're
that's it. They don't.
No, they don't. Most people, a lot of people haven't got one. So
part of a critical analysis of stuff like this is it doesn't involve just switching off empathy completely.
People who think the past is so different that no one, child mortality was high, then they didn't grieve about their children dying. What?
Yeah, that's a big one, isn't it?
Are you off your rocker?
Oh shit. Well, I mean, it's also the thing that the Victorians invented childhood. Do you want to tell the Tudor kids all their dolls and rattles? Oh, by the way, you're not real. You don't exist.
You don't have
tiny
toys.
adult.
And I bet that was a real compensation to all the kids in the workhouses.
Yeah, they
Are
had
you
lovely
enjoying your
childhoods. didn't they?
childhood? Are you enjoying your childhood? Hey, you look like
In
you
the
are.
mine, getting your toes
Yeah.
torn off by a coal wagon. Oh, a lovely childhood.
Up a chimney. Yeah.
I remember learning about them going behind the weaving looms to pick out the little bits of cotton that fall off, and then getting trapped. Awful.
Oh, Jesus.
Mm.
Ah, the Victorian era. Glorious, glorious it was, apart from the fact that it wasn't.
It also like that's such stupid things to say about because they dress like little people. What? Because they had what? How many sets of clothes do you reckon Tudor children had? Like you think they've got? Like, it's this idea that yeah.
Also, we are seeing them in portraits
now. Kids are dressed like adults. It's just the clothes are very different.
But also, we are seeing them in portraits where they're all in matching clothes with their siblings and their parents.
Yeah.
It's fictional.
Yeah.
That's fictional.
It's like if you have just took wedding portraits now and said that's how everyone.
Yeah.
You know,
all the little boys in three-piece suits with dicky bows. Of course they are.
Yeah.
Of course they are.
And
they're doing
clean.
finger painting.
That's a real indication that it's not real.
Yeah, they're doing finger painting of top hat and tails at daycare. That's how they dress. Of course they are, babe.
Yeah.
All the women
it's currently hot.
doing their
I can't get my
their
children
bridal
into
dresses.
It's with the weather as it currently is. I can't get my children into trousers. Like no one's got bottoms on. Everyone's in pants, running around. Well, crawling around and running around. Kids are kids.
Yeah.
They're covered in cucumber and sticky, and they're in their pants. That's what happens.
They're not covered in cucumber in my house.
No,
you're not allowed cucumber in my house. Boys are just dirt. I had a great description of boys once. Noise with dirt on, and I was like, yeah,
correct. Correct.
Because I love them very much, but boys are dirty, smelly creatures. Who like to parkour just without a thought
of the furniture.
Yeah. Well, my eldest only parkoured once, and it ended up in an open fracture. So let that be a lesson to you all.
Yeah. Right. Can we wrap it up?
I have a question. What's happening next week?
Next week, Kat is going to be leading the way, talking about the myth that there's a long history of ravens at the tower and all of that associated mythology.
And Kat, tell us about all the other things.
Yes, so if you've liked what you've seen, and of course you have, then do make sure you have subscribed to our channel, that you have clicked the bell icon beside the subscribe button and select all. Hopefully that will notify you when we're next uploading. Like the video, share the video, comments. The more you comment, the more that YouTube sees that people are interacting with it and they share the video out more. That helps us to grow our community. That is what we want. Of course, YouTube is sneaky. So we have got a fail-safe, which is our Substack. If you go over to our Substack, that is History After Dark hub.substack.com. That is where you can find about where all the stuff we're doing. We are approaching new merch drop. That's going to be on there as well. And if you want to listen to us as a podcast, there's links to that. When you go to the podcast, obviously there's no subscribe or like, but there is reviews. So if you enjoy what you've listened to on the podcast, give us a 5-star review. If you haven't enjoyed it, no one needs to know. Quietly. Bye. See you next time. Not everything is everyone. That's fine. Additionally, if you have enjoyed what you've seen, you can show us that you've enjoyed it with money. For that, you go to www.buymeacoffee.com/hadpodcast. You can throw money /Winnebagos in our general direction. Yeah. You can also go there to join our close friends. That's on Instagram, where there's a little circle top of Instagram. If the Had logo has a green light around it, that means you're already close friends. And what that is Catherine finds depraved shit all over the internet and brings it to us. It's like a cat bringing you a dead bird, except for it's usually about beavers and historical sex. And she puts it up. so you get to have an idea about what our group chat is like. It's a good time. Additionally, we have got merch. This is my War Boner merch. We've got History of Stark merch. We've got Rough Beaver merch. We've got Timmy is a Problem merch. We've got No Feet for Free on the Internet merch. And there's more merch coming. So you can check that out as well. Please do make sure that you come and follow us on our individual social medias. They are linked in the description box. Any more for any more? Is that everything?
I think that's everything.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
In which case, be good. And if you can't be good, be careful. And if you can't be careful, for the love of all that is holy, do not cut. We're going to leave in 3, 2, 1. Bye.